I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to introduce, and then Tom and Ellen, can you introduce yourselves? And then how about all the students introduce yourselves after? Okay, so I'm Donna Masini. I've been teaching at Hunter for years. I've been teaching in the MFA program since it started. And I think that's 1999 or 2000. And you'll hear more from me later when we kind of talk a little bit about the program. Tom?
Yeah, I've been teaching here for about as long as Donna has in the MFA program. I've taught at various other programs, over the course of the years. And one of the things that, I would like to stress that I've loved the most is something that Adam talked about, and that was the intimate nature of the program. And so we can have, more questions on that, or happy to answer that, and any kind of information you might need about the course structure or whatnot, happy to answer. We can talk in specifics about, the way each of us teaches and what we're teaching. So any kind of question that you have, please feel free to fire away. Alan?
Yeah, I am kind of like a academic utility infielder. I'm just filling in for the year, and just retired from University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, where I taught for 25 years. I've also taught for the last 10, 15 years at the Warren Wilson low residency MFA program, and at other places as well. So I would defer to Tom and Donna because they have more institutional memory than I have. I'm just only into my first 5 or 6 weeks here. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about what it's like to be a new teacher here.
Well, we might ask you to talk a little bit about your workshop and how you run a workshop, and
will do anytime. Yep.
So why don't we start with so who's here? Allison, I see you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Allison. I'm a second year in the program. I'm from Westchester, New York, and I can answer any questions you have about being a student here.
Jenna?
I'm Jenna. I'm also a second year with Allison. I'm from Rochester, New York. And yeah, I can also answer any questions, and I'll just be looking at the chat for any questions that you have.
Okay. Grace?
Hello, I'm Grace Gresham. I'm a first year MFA student. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. And yeah, I'm here. I'll popcorn it to Callie.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Callie. I'm also a first year. I'm from Albany, New York, so just upstate. Yeah, and I guess I should also popcorn, so I'll go to Karen.
Hi, my name is Karen. I'm a first year. I'm from Queens, New York, and I'm here to answer any of your questions. Rakai?
I was hoping you didn't see me. I'm Rakai Jordan, from Bronx, New York, first year. You can ask questions, but I might derail it because I tend to do that.
Okay, thanks, Rakai. True to form. Jamie is here. Jamie is an alum who's popping in to visit us.
Hi. Yes, at the time I was at Hunter, I was living in Yonkers. Now I'm in a PhD program in Utah, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the program or about life after the program.
Yeah, Jamie just got her first book taken, which is very exciting. Okay, is there anybody I'm missing? Because I can't see anybody. I don't see. Okay. All right. So, why don't we, Adam talked a little bit about the structure of the program, but I'm just going to run over it. Hi, can whoever that is mute? Can you mute yourself? Okay. Um, uh, I want to talk a little bit about the workshops and the craft classes. That's really what you want to know, because you're going to be taking a workshop, a craft class, and a literature class for your first and second semesters. Your third and fourth semesters, you'll be taking workshop in literature and thesis. So let's talk a little bit about workshop. You know what, Tom, would you start and talk a little bit about the way you teach craft?
Sure. I mean, right now I'm not teaching craft. I'm teaching something called Thesis 1, but there's certain, kind of crossovers between the two in the way I teach craft. I mean, one of the things I like to do when I teach craft is I don't think it really does, I mean, a whole lot of good to talk in abstractions about how things are done. And so what I always like to try to do is I like to try to build it around a particular poet. And
is there somebody who is
Yeah, it's Julia Powers. I don't know.
Julia, can you mute yourself? Okay.
Shall I start over?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as I was saying, when I teach craft, what I like to do is I like to talk about it in as specific terms as possible. And the most specific terms that are possible that I know of are to look at the work of a particular poet and to try to see the kinds of, things that poet does well, and then kind of extrapolate from that. So, for example, if I'm teaching a class on description, a particular class on description, and, you can break it down into whatever different parts you want. But if I were going to teach a class on description, during the course of the semester, one course in, one week on description, what I would do is I would probably present people with a poem by Elizabeth Bishop or a whole book by Elizabeth Bishop. I would probably give them a poem by or a whole book by Sylvia Plath. And then, we could talk about the way in which each one of those authors handles figurative language, but in the most specific terms as it's, grounded in each particular poem that we talk about in detail. And so the way I think about, craft, and it's funny because we just had a course, we just had a class on Seamus Heaney, and he's got a wonderful essay in which he talks about the difference between what he calls craft and technique. And he says craft is that thing which anybody can learn how to do and do fairly well. And he says, it's the kind of, surface mastery which wins, contests. And then he says there's technique, which is an aspect of craft, but a more thoroughgoing one. And he says that's when you get the feeling of how both your social voice and your intelligence into a poem about a subject that really matters to you. And so that's what I always try to, base my, craft assignments on, or whoever happens to be the poet that I'm, borrowing from, is that I want to make the distinction between craft and technique, because technique is really the essential thing.
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about how I teach craft. I'm teaching craft right now. I have certain favorite topics. One of them being syntax, which I love. We spent quite a bit of time on the sentence and the line so far this semester. But I tend to kind of mix it up. So the thing that remains constant is we're always using poems. Unlike Tom, I don't usually say, except if it's the poems of the person who's visiting, I don't say, here, read the Norton anthology cover to cover this week. Or what I usually do is give probably about 10 to 15 poems and maybe an essay, a craft essay, and a whole bunch of prompts and revision prompts each week to try things out. So think of it as a kind of a language lab to move into ways of writing that are not your customary ways of writing. I love teaching craft. I love teaching workshop. You can ask me specific things, but maybe we can talk a little bit about workshop now. Ellen, why don't you talk about how you're running workshop this semester?
Running it mostly with the emphasis on a combination of, for the students, and all of them or many of them are in this chat, so they can correct me if I misspeak. But basically what I try to get everybody to do is to lower the bar of what they expect, so that they're not producing work that they think somehow their future hinges on every week. You know, they turn in a poem a week, and to lower the bar in terms of expectation, and then to work on those poems each week as if their life depended on it. So that's the kind of the double mood. Mostly it's just about what we can learn about poetry through the exercise of writing and speaking about it. And even a bad poem in a workshop can teach everybody a lot, including the person who wrote it. So long as the emphasis is on what we are there to learn, not, who's there to be validated or who's there to be praised or dispraised. So the emphasis is entirely on poetry and not on ego, and try to have everybody park their vanity and competitiveness at the door and put that aside so that we can just sort of learn as much as we can in the short time that we're together. Everybody turns in a poem a week, and we try to get as many of them as we can, through as many of them as we can, and everybody writes comments on them. But mostly it's just about using each poem that everybody writes as an opportunity to learn something about what makes good poetry good and bad poetry bad. And there's all kinds of occasions to learn that from everything that everybody turns in. And there's also there's another thing that I know that Donna, Tom are wary of and aware of as well, which is to guard against the tendency of a lot of workshops to produce a kind of workshop style, where something that is kind of totally out of the mainstream of what people are doing is criticized precisely because it's doing something different. And so we try to respect what everybody is doing, and to talk about the poems in terms of the intentions behind the poem, and then at a later point talk about whether or not the decisions that are made within the poem are serving those intentions or not. But it's important to respect what everybody's trying to do before you prematurely evaluate it. So that's sort of the spirit of the workshop that I try to encourage.
Thanks, Ellen. That's a really important point. For me, teaching a workshop, my goal is that you want to go back and work on your poem, that you go back excited to go and do another draft. Mm-hmm. I say this all the time. It's just a draft. You're bringing something in, and you want to know that you have energy and spirit enough to go back and keep working. The last thing we want in a workshop is for people to end. And I know, because I was in a couple of those workshops where you just go home kind of demoralized. And sure, you get upset if your poem's not working, but the thing that we try to encourage is a respect for the process. It's poetry. It's not, you're not learning how to change a tire on a car. I'm sure that's really difficult too, But these are poems, and all the time I think, if we told people to bring in a cello and you've been playing a cello for a couple of years, you're not going to sound, you're going to have things that you want to improve, right? But I love workshop because in craft, I get to see drafts of things that are done over the week, maybe multiple drafts of things that have been addressing a prompt. But in workshop, we see things that people have spent time with. And well, in Alan's class, maybe a little less time because they're doing a poem a week, but things that, I are beyond what you're doing as an exercise or an attempt to figure out something technical or learn something technical. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, well, in workshop, I'll just describe it like one of the things I think, because I think I teach it very similar to the way both of you do, at least in terms of spirit. But in terms of just the conversation, the way the conversation unfolds, is one of the things that I've always found important is to get rid of the sense that there's a particular kind of authority in the room, either me or somebody else, another one of the students. And so what happens in my class in terms of the discussion is I say the whole idea of the discussion is to get as many viewpoints out on the table as possible. Then you don't have to argue about them. And then it becomes the poet's responsibility to go home, sift through those viewpoints, see which ones resonate and which ones don't. And, one of the things about a workshop is that, a suggestion which might strike you as being completely off the mark during one particular week on one particular poem might come back to haunt you 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, years later, and you suddenly realize that the piece of advice that seemed irrelevant then now seems relevant. So there's never a wasted gesture in workshop, and there's never anything that is just too out there, because there's always a possibility that sometime later in the future, that's going to be exactly the voice that comes to haunt you that you thought was irrelevant, years ago. And I've had that experience certainly in showing poems to people. I remember there were 2 times I got really deep advice from 2 particular poets, and I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. And then I find, many years later, every time I sit down to write, that these comments come back to me, and and really they've sort of shaped how I think about sitting down and trying to revise. So all I'm saying really is just keep an open mind and don't feel like anything is wasted.
Yeah, the other thing is about workshop is, and I found this out sort of like while I was a student, I think you often learn more about, you learn more when you're watching somebody else's poem discussed and when you're talking about somebody else's poem. And I find that there are times even now when I've looked at someone's work and I'm working on something on my own, and I think, oh, right, this is exactly the problem they were up against. And how did we talk about that? And so I love in workshop the way everybody gets to see, because you move beyond talking about that specific poem, maybe to talking about how you would manage this particular problem, right? When you come up against it in your work, maybe, there's a whole lot of abstraction that's not grounded, or you're writing about doubt and uncertainty, and you're only, using very emphatic, you're writing everything in the indicative. You're not, you could move into some kind of language that gives a sense of uncertainty. And those are the kinds of things you notice sometimes in when somebody else's poem is being discussed. So, and I think it's why writing programs work. You learn, you're learning, like you should be like paying everybody's tuition because you're learning everything that they're getting from their poems, you're getting in your own poems. Now I want to just make sure this, are there any questions, Jenna? Do we have any questions coming up?
Nothing in the chat yet, but if you do have questions as we go, definitely drop it and we can just like circle into it.
Can I ask, because there's a Q&A as well. Are people putting the questions in the Q&A?
I don't think that I think that there was a little notification that the Q&A was disabled.
Was
So
it?
Yeah, but people are sending it in the chat, so I
Okay, all right, so fine.
And I just got two, so do you want
Okay,
me to read them?
Fiona, go ahead.
From Fiona, my question would be to the students, what has been the most impactful piece of advice or critique you've received from your professor on your poetry?
Some of you want to take that?
I can take that one. I think Donna's always telling us in craft to play. I think the most important piece of advice there is to focus on that play and to kind of let your imagination run wild, not to write the next line as what you think the next line should be, but to just kind of release those expectations and kind of just run with it, take it less seriously. As Donna was just saying, it's just a draft. It's nothing you have to treat as something precious, which I think is a really difficult thing to do, but useful to practice.
Right. That's a good start. Should we, okay, so do you want to keep going or does somebody else want to add to that?
I just wanted to add to what Allison said. Something Donna also told us is to take risks. And just that really helped me to kind of like push myself to come out of my comfort zone and my writing habits and to try new things.
Okay.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
Something that I thought was really helpful, not on my poetry specifically, but in workshop was Alan had said we should really kind of take a step back and talk first about what the poem is doing and think about what it's doing. And I think that that was a really great and useful thing in both evaluating our peers' work and also kind of being able to look on our own work and do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to read the next question.
Okay.
Yeah. From Pamela, does Hunter accept or welcome older students? And would my previous publication history be an asset or a liability to my application? I have one full-length poetry book published and one chapbook. I know I still have so much to learn and want to learn more about craft.
Okay, there's your last sentence is like for me the most important sentence. We don't think about age, we don't think about I mean, we try to go a little bit older rather than taking, somebody who's right out of undergrad. We're finding that works better. But I love your last sentence, which is, where is it? I know I still have so much to learn, want to learn about craft. That's what we look for. We look for writers we know have a gift, have something, a gift for language, a gift for music, who have a building vision, but we want a group of students who feel like they want to learn and want to learn from us specifically. And we've had people before who've come in with a book, or several people have come in with books, and it's not a liability, it's not an asset. We look at the work, and the work is your best asset, and then your personal statement, where we can talk a little bit later if you want to hear about personal statements, like what we want to hear from you. We want to see you on the page. But I think does that answer that, Pamela? Oh yeah, I can see you. You know, anybody else, if you feel like turning your cameras on so we can see you, that might be nice. Might give a little sense of community. You want to keep going with the questions? Jenna, you're doing so well.
Thank you. From Megan, do workshops follow the Iowa model? The poet whose work is being discussed is not allowed to speak.
Is that the Iowa model? I'll say for me, I've loosened up in that respect. I used to, for years, I used to say just, you know, I was trained by Audre Lorde. She was my first teacher, and Audre was like, say nothing, just write down what everybody said. So I used to, you know, so I did, and I still tell everyone to write down all the comments. And now I'll say, yeah, you can, if you need to say something, if you have something that you really want to discuss, yeah, but I want to make sure that you're hearing clearly what people are saying, and not giving us information that's going to make us read the poem. Yeah, I mean, that's a longer conversation. I'm not as strict in that way as I used to be. I'll just say that.
Well, the way I would do it is I just, at the very beginning, before if there's any kind of any kind of discussion of the poem, I'll just ask the poet to say, well, what are your concerns with this poem? And then, then they can say whatever their concerns are or not. And sometimes people say, no, I just prefer to hear the discussion as it unfolds. But often people will say, well, these are the things that I'm worried about. And that's often where the conversation starts. So, no, I don't, I taught at Iowa. And I certainly didn't use the Iowa method because it just, I mean, the whole fly on the wall idea, it just seems silly to me. It just doesn't, that's not how poems live in the world. They have context.
That's right.
And the idea that, we're all going to have this kind of pure experience of the poem without the personality of the author in the room just doesn't seem to be very realistic. And also, I'm not sure how useful it is. I mean, you want to be able to know that people can hear what you're saying, but at the same time, as Donna said, not trying to steer the conversation in a direction that is going to pretty much nullify anything that you hear. So I would say that, for me, I like to have the poet who reads the poem have the first word. And at the end of the discussion, if they have anything to say, they can have the last word.
And I'd also like to have them interrupt at any point during the discussion, not to defend the poem because the poem's not on trial, but just to sort of ask questions and make sure that the issues that they are trying to grapple with in the poem are being addressed by the class discussion. There's nothing more frustrating than when you come out of a workshop and you feel as though the poem you wrote wasn't the poem that was discussed in the class. So at least you want to have the person who wrote the poem have at least one question anyway, serious question they have about it, addressed so that they can feel as though they're heard in some way.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing. I mean, probably the hardest thing to do in talking about somebody else's poem is rather than, lead off with a bunch of evaluative adjectives, like it, I don't like it, any of that kind of stuff. Probably the most important thing is just to try to give a description as you possibly can of what you think the poem is doing, how it's operating, how it's made, as opposed to, immediately jumping in and say, well, let's cut the head off. And then, we'll put the head where the arm is and put the arm where the head is. I think you have to know, like Alan said, what you're talking about before you start discussing it.
The only problem with that, and as students in my workshop will say, I set that as an ideal and as an aspiration, and it is an aspirational request because there's so limited amount of time in so many poems. So if you spend, if you have 15 minutes per poem and you spend 15 minutes describing the poem rather than, it can be a little frustrating. And so people try to short circuit that by evaluating prematurely, but it is, it is really important to make someone feel as though that the poem that's under discussion is the poem that was written. And I know that, you know, the people that I show poems to, which is Tom, Sleigh, nobody else. But the best thing that often he can do for me is just describe to me what it is he thinks I've done. And if it's different from what I've done, I realize, oh, well, then there's a problem here, you know. So description is really important. Premature evaluation is always a problem, but it's something, it's like a parasite or a virus. It's always in the class, and it's hard to sort of completely suppress. And I you know, as the MFA students in the class will tell you, I absolutely set that as a goal, and even I haven't been able to, you know, adhere to it, you know. So but it is a goal. It is an aspiration.
And one last thing I guess I would say is that when we do workshop, the first class, everybody goes around the room and talks about what they want to work on that semester and what they would like people to focus on. If you really want people to focus all semester on how you're handling the line, you know, so we'll talk about that on the first day. Oftentimes, you know, it goes by the wayside and we just end up talking about the poem in general, but we do have a sense of what people are, you know, most interested in working on. Jenna, cut us off whenever and ask another question.
Yeah, I can do the next one. Actually, the next two are kind of the same, from Gianna and Ebony. Do students in the program have full-time jobs? And if so, is it feasible? / how is managing that while doing the program? And I can talk on that a little bit because I do work full-time. I work at Hunter, which is something that will be available probably to you. And it's totally manageable. It's definitely, you know, you're gonna find yourself doing work on the subway and stuff, but it's enjoyable. And I think it's kind of like when you're in it, you're in it. I never feel overwhelmed necessarily, but I constantly feel energized by it. But if anyone else wants to talk on it, I know a lot of other people do work as well.
Yeah, I think most people in the program work either full-time or part-time. I work at Hunter with Jenna. The program is definitely designed to allow you to work because the classes don't begin until 5:30 in the evening. I think having a full-time job that requires a lot of writing might be difficult because it could, you know, if you're writing all day, it could potentially sap your energy to write creatively. But I agree with everything Jenna said. I think if anything, it's energizing to have that very stacked schedule while also finding ways to weave poetry into every little moment of your life. It almost forces you to be thinking about it constantly.
I know Spencer's not here tonight. He works full-time teaching 2nd and 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always had people who've worked full-time, and you know, it can be tough, but it's definitely doable. Jamie, a bunch of people in your year were working full-time, yeah?
Yeah, most of us worked full-time. I worked at Hunter and had 2 part-time jobs. It ends up being exactly like Jenna and Allison were saying. Like, it just forces you to fit things into these little pools and pockets of time that you get, which ends up being really helpful because since the MFA has ended, that game doesn't change. Like, it really teaches you how to use whatever time you do have to actually get done what you want to get done creatively.
I can go to the next question from Zarin. I have been getting mixed answers to this question. Just want to clarify, what is the application fee and is it waived for CUNY Bachelor graduates?
Wait, I've been getting mixed answers to this question. I just want to clarify. What is the application fee? Oh, I don't know. I actually don't know. Do any of you know?
I think it's $65, if I'm not mistaken.
And is it
But if-
waived for if you're a CUNY, because you're a CUNY grad, was it waived?
You have to go talk to the mission office, I believe. I didn't get mine wavered, but that's only because I didn't go to the proper channels to get it wavered. There's also a deadline for it, so if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so I would suggest who asked that question. Is that Zarin?
Yes.
Zarin, I would suggest you call the admissions office or write the admissions office. Have you done that?
Not yet, but I will do it, I guess, the following week. Thank you.
Yeah, call admissions because, and somebody there, Milena Solo, somebody there will be able to give you the information.
Great. Thank you so much.
The next question from Carol is, in general, how can a person get over themselves enough to feel comfortable to write, not be so concerned about people's criticism or putting their hands all over their work, editing? I realize this takes time.
Anybody want to take that one?
I could say something to that. As a first year, I think that part of it is like the community of writers you're in and like trusting the other writers and knowing that they're also in that same boat. I think that, I mean, maybe it's harder like when you're on your own writing, but I've definitely found that in the program, I feel really comfortable sharing things and knowing that they're going to have sort of like a good reception or a reception that is kind, if anything. I think it has to do a lot with the other people in the program for sure.
And we think about that a lot when we're looking at statements, personal statements, when we're, we look at the work, but we also just really want to get a sense of one of our goals is to have a group that's not competitive, that is really you can't suppress all competitive feeling, but a group that really cares about the others in the group. And we've been, I think, really lucky. Wouldn't you say, Tom? We've been
I totally agree, Donna. It's been amazing, really.
Really lucky year after year. I mean, here's Jamie. She graduated how many years ago? How many? But they
2020.
2020. Okay. But we have students who are still getting together in their groups. There are people who were 10, 12 years ago are still getting together and sharing poems with their groups. One I just heard from got his book taken a couple weeks ago. And it's exciting to me to see the friendships that are fostered. And it is because we do create really try to create an atmosphere of trust and goodwill and concern for everybody's poems.
Yeah, I'm new to the program, obviously, have no history in it, but just in general, the only reason to go to any MFA program is because of the quality of the community that you're going to find there. Because as Adam said in his opening statement, all you need to keep you going is one or two readers whose opinion and whose judgment you internalize, you trust, and that's why you come to a place like this, is to find your reader, or your audience, I guess is another way to put it. And there's no other reason, because it's not a gateway to a job. It's not even necessarily a gateway to publication, though great if it happens, and it does happen to a good number of people who come out of this program. But the reason you go is for the community, for the collaboration, for doing the work in company with other people. And that's the only thing that in the long haul is going to keep you going.
Jenna, how are we doing with the questions?
We're good. I did miss a question earlier from Emily. Emily, I'm sorry about that. Emily asked, why for each of the students, you chose Hunter for your MFA.
Okay, guys, take it away.
I could start since I'm already speaking. I chose Hunter as my MFA for a ton of reasons. The main one was I really liked the size. The size is, in my experience of workshop, like the perfect workshop size. And it's really good for community. And I really, really wanted community, as we were just talking about, because it's crucial to feeling comfortable to writing and showing people your work. I also liked the structure of craft, literature, thesis, workshop, because those are just central. And Hunter is fully funded if you're a New York State, if you live in New York State, and it's in New York City, so it's kind of the perfect backdrop. But I'll give the floor to everyone else so I don't talk too much.
I had very similar reasons for choosing Hunter. I think my main reason for being drawn to the program was also the size. You work really closely with 3 professors who get to know you and your work really well as a group of at max 11 other students who it's impossible not to become a very tight-knit group with, which is so crucial to editing and growing as a writer, to have even one reader who you can trust, let alone this small but substantial group of professors and fellow students. And then, of course, I wanted to be in New York City, and this is one of, if not the only, fully funded, I don't want to say the only because I'm not sure, but it's definitely one of the only fully funded programs in New York City. So all of that together, it was just kind of perfect.
Well, for me, I chose this program because mainly like Jenna and Allison have said, mainly because of the size. I came from a smaller liberal arts college that had a very small ratio of student to teachers. So I knew that I didn't want to increase that number. I wanted to keep that because I really love that about my school. And here I'm excited about the thesis next year the most, just having someone to talk to about my vision of where I see my poetry going. And then also I enjoy workshop as well, just to see if people understand my vision. And, it's just nice to hear more voices than yourself.
I just want to echo what everyone said, what Jenna, Allison, and Grace said. I really like the size of the program, that it's located in New York City, but mostly because I didn't have a community of poets and writers to bounce out ideas off of or to workshop my poems with. And I just really needed that to kind of grow in my practice. And so I was looking specifically for a place, like a safe place to workshop poems with like-minded people and who are also passionate about poetry. So this just was the perfect place for me.
For me personally, since I was a Hunter undergraduate, I knew how it functioned, and I was attracted to how each professor is very personal with each student. I went into the program because I took Donna's class in poetry, and I was like, I think she teaches at MFA, so it was just my dream college. Went in there, and I'm here. I can't really do a direct question. It seems like I've been at Hunter for all my life. So
Thanks, Rakai.
It was kind of the same for me for as a lot of other people said too, the size, the community, the structure of the classes, the location, the price. And I also had read a lot of like the poetry of the professors. I haven't even like told you guys this yet, but I like read a lot of your poems and really connected with them. And so I was like, these are really people that I want to learn from. And I think that was a big part of it for me as well. So.
Yeah, for me, it really was. It was about the community, but it also sort of ties back to the question about older students. I had another career that I was sort of burning out in. And I had a conversation with one of my undergraduate professors, and she was like, you know, if you really feel like you don't have a community and what you really want to do is be writing poems again, apply to Hunter, you know who's there. And it was the best decision that I could have made.
Did we get everybody? I think we did. Okay, Jenna, keep us going.
Yeah, so the next question from Vespi and also Robert, they're kind of the same question, so I'll read both little paragraphs. Vespi said, "Greetings from India. The idea of a year-long thesis program in the second semester and the intimacy of a tight-knit community of students is unique and very exciting to me. I had a question with respect to the writing sample. Would it be best to focus on selecting poems for the sample that are all strung together by a single theme or a single style? For instance, would it be okay to include a single concrete poem in there whilst none of the other poems in the sample are concrete?" And then Robert said similarly, how many poems do you need to submit? Can different forms be submitted together? Example, modern sonnets, villanelles, ghazals, prose, etc. So I think in general, writing sample.
Okay, writing sample. And I think we also saw something about personal statements. So why don't we just go writing sample, personal statement? Tom, you want to start?
Sure. Well, in terms of the writing sample, like Alan said, like Donna, I think has also said, we're not looking for any kind of, we all have really broad taste, and none of us are looking for a particular kind of writer who does this particular thing or that particular thing. It just isn't like that. I would say what we're all interested in is, complex feeling. I'd say that, we think about, the originality, not in a, kind of, I don't know, 19th century way about originality, but we're always looking for poetry that actually feels as if it's, got a lot of the speaking voice of the person in it. So we get a very strong sense of, what it is that this particular person's linguistic gift is. And so what that means is that there, people have different kinds of ways of approaching a poem. I mean, when we get lots and lots of applications, there will be some people who will write, very, the writing will seem at first somewhat surreal. Other people will write, kind of straight dramatic lyrics. Other people will seem as if they're writing in a meditative mode. But really, none of that, that's all well and good. We're not looking for anything in any kind of particular style. And so when you're putting your manuscript together, I would just say that you're not going to game the system. You're not going to psych out, the zeitgeist. Just sit down and say to yourself, which of these poems really mean the most to me? Which of these poems seem to me to represent, the kind of poet that I think I am, and also represent the kind of poet who I think I might like to be, because part of it is trying to present to us an idea of who you might be, not just now, but in the future. And I think that's, you're not gonna psych it out. It's like, the whole razzle dazzle. I'll give them a formal poem. I'll give them this poem. I'll give them that poem. It's not like a poem show. So just put together the poems that you think are the strongest, that represent what is most important to you. And then in terms of the personal statement, I would say do something rather similar to that, just say what your involvement with writing is, maybe where you went, what your training is. And believe me, it doesn't matter a darn to us if you've got a BA in literature. None of that really matters. You know, if you do have a BA in literature, great. If you've got a BA in electrical engineering, great. You know, what we're really going to look at is we're going to look at the language on the page and relationship to the personal statement, and just to try to get a sense of, you know, whether A, this is the right, you know, fit for you in terms of the kinds of things that we might be able to provide you with. And B, if you really do seem to like want to be in this kind of a community, because some people really don't want to be in a tight-knit community. And I'll just say one last thing. I taught at Iowa, and I'm not going to badmouth Iowa, although I am going to badmouth Iowa a little bit. But there were so many people there, and there was so much, you know, under the surface and just nakedly on the surface competition, that there were moments, you know, when I think it was really unpleasant for the students and possibly for the faculty, although, you know, the students were much more vulnerable than the faculty, obviously. And so when I got to Hunter and I saw the kind of atmosphere, you know, that Donna wanted, I think that if you want a place where, you know, you're not going to have that kind of static in your head, that, you know, this is the place to be, and you need to say that in your personal statement.
Yeah, if you want to come to Hunter, really let us know. If it's your top choice, let us know.
Yeah.
Let us know that you want to study with us. In the poems, I just want to say we read everything and we talk about everything. And there are times when, you know, there might be somebody who's really got it together formally, or and it's kind of, it doesn't move me, or it's dead on the page, or they don't seem to want to move further in the work. And then there might be somebody whose the work is not very polished at all, and we'll be sitting there and saying, remember that moment in the barber shop in that poem? Or do you remember that image of, let's go back and look at that poem. And so it's collaborative. We look at things, you know, we don't argue, but we're like, I want to stand up for this person because, and the personal statement is another thing. So poems can be you can have a formal poem, an informal poem. You don't have to feel like it's a cohesive little chapbook that you're sending us. In the personal statement, be aware of how many people start, I have been writing since I was 2.5. And, you know, it's great, but it's not going to stand out. Really tell us, you know, who you are, what you care about, you know, maybe the struggles you have writing, but really make it about the writing, and really let us know who you read. I want to know who you're reading. And you know, if you're reading widely or what you want to work on. It's just like you're applying to a school. You're not a professional. You're applying to study. So you don't have to make it look like you know everything. What do you want to learn? And what do you want to work on?
Yeah, I have been on the admissions committees of a lot of different programs, and most of the personal statements are designed to help the people making the judgments to eliminate the maniac fringe. You know, the people who just show that they are just crazy lunatics and that, or, you know, or monstrously self-absorbed, and you don't want to have anything to do with them. So don't start by telling, you know, by telling the committee, whoever it is that's judging it, you know, how much you have to offer, you know, and, you know, and how you want to change the world or whatever. You know, don't do that. Talk, as Donna said, about what you feel you need to learn and how important community is, and how the give and take with other writers has been an essential part of what it is you do. But if you come across as seeming like you just want to be validated, you know, I feel like I need to go to Hunter because I'm great, and Hunter will be the conduit that get my greatness out into the world, then you'll never, yeah, you won't, that won't help. So you want to make it seem so at least that you get along with people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I mean, what are you passionate about? I mean, some people, their work comes out of they've done some work abroad. They've done some, they've done some translation. They've worked with immigrant groups, and that's important to their work. It's all about your work and who you are in the world and what you care about.
And what you want it to be, where you want it to go, not necessarily where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jenna, how are we doing?
Good. There's a few more questions in the chat, and kind of going off that. Fiona asked if there were any international students in the program.
We have had international students before. It's not easy. Tom, do you remember what?
I mean, the reason why it's not easy has nothing to do with, how can I put it? It doesn't have anything to do with our willingness to have international students. It has everything to do with the bureaucracy that is Hunter.
Right.
And the reason why it's complicated is, I mean, we had one person who, because they could not get, residency in New York City, both years they had to pay full tuition. And it's sometimes really complicated to get visa clearances, but that doesn't have anything to do with us. That has to do with the bureaucracy. The fact that you're with educational bureaucracy inside a city bureaucracy inside a state bureaucracy. So it, like Donna said, it can get really complicated, but that should not deter people, because we have had people.
Yeah, it's happened. The president had to step in, right?
Yeah.
College. She's not here anymore, but
yeah, there was an indigenous guy from Australia who came here. Was a terrific, fiction writer, and he's done incredibly well. But it wasn't simple. There are a lot of hoops to jump through.
Right. Yeah.
The next question from Sarah. Sarah said, "This is such an inspiring insight to the program. Does it help to have poems published before applying?"
It really, not to my mind.
No, I agree.
It's always nice to have your poems published. It's great, but it's not going to give you an edge. It's just the poem.
Yeah. And you can get into the program despite having poems published.
Exactly. And it's not going to be a hindrance if you do not.
Exactly.
No.
When you clear away all that stuff, it's like the experience that we're having with the page as the words unfold. All the rest of it
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think the last question we have from Seren, and it says, to the students, what do you think stood out in your application the most that got you accepted into the program, and any advice you would give? Rakai, do you want to start, just because I saw you put something good in the chat? Is that okay?
Appreciate you calling me out like that. I'm not sure if this question could be asked from the perspective of the student. I'm not sure which stood out. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the question again, and it went down and down and down. What's the question?
You answered it, Rakai, because we don't ever tell you what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you don't know what it is. Sometimes we'll just tell you when we call you on the phone or do an interview, a Zoom interview, and say, oh, we loved this or we loved that. But the fact is, you don't always remember after that. Do any of you have a sense of what it was that got you in? Somebody once sent a picture of themselves to Tom. That was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
What kind of picture?
It was just like a little headshot. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Well, this is not a drama school, but
Yeah. Anything else? Nobody? Sorry, it's my cat. Anybody have anything they want to add? I wish we could see you all, but I guess we can't. We'll give it another minute, see if there's any more questions. Any of you have anything else you want to say or add? Something we didn't touch on?
I will add, if people have questions about procedures, you should feel free to write Mike Rizzo. And just to ask him, what's the question about whether or not people who graduated from Hunter, don't have to pay the application fee. Well, that's a question that, Mike might be able to help you with, or at least he can steer you, like Donna said, to the admissions office or somebody like Milena Solo. So really don't feel like just because, you have questions that you then don't know who to go to. Well, you can go to Mike Rizzo, for, practical solutions to problems about applying and all that.
Yeah. I just saw somebody say, just to confirm, 500 words, is that correct? I think, what is it, like we're not strict about that, but page or two, just to say what you need to say.
I love the question. So Zarin asks, is it mandatory to mention a faculty member in the personal statement? I think what's mandatory is not to mention a faculty member in another program in the statement.
Yeah.
Because we have gotten, applications like.
We know you're applying to several places. Some people are applying to several places. Try to make it sound like you want to come to Hunter. Even on your application, it does ask you where you're applying to, and that's fine. But I know it can get confusing. The technology can get confusing. So at the end, it says, and I really want to be at Sarah Lawrence. And it's like, and we can forgive that if the poems are great, and and we're just, it's like, it's good for a laugh.
Wow. But like Donna said, we'll read right by it, but it does help to know that at least the person is applying to Hunter, not to Columbia or wherever.
Yeah. Anything else? I think that kind of covers it, but we're not, we're around. You can get in touch with Mike if you want to, any more information. You can get in touch with us. You can send an email if you need to. We're here. And the other thing is, stop by to our readings. Stop by. You're at the open house. Stop by. There's both of the poetry readings. We had Van Jordan this semester, and Mary Shebist was last night. We don't have any more poetry next semester. We'll have Terrence Hayes and Catherine Barnett reading. So come, stop by, see us. Oops, I see 2 more messages. Oops, thank you. Love Terrence Hayes. Yep. Okay. So it's lovely to kind of meet you this way, and hope to see you or hear from you, and have a good rest of your night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
everybody. Thanks, guys,
Bye.
for coming, and thanks, Jamie, for showing up. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.